Hello, and welcome to the Fresh Air Sci-Fi Show. I'm Joe.
And I'm Dave.
And tonight we have a very, very special guest, known on Twitter as Rev Infidel. How you doing, buddy?
Doing real good. How are you doing?
Absolutely fantastic. Now, everyone out there, you might have checked out his video, or at least some of the responses that we've been doing in the 10 questions for atheists. And his answers were all very interesting, and we thought that we'd bring him on to talk about a couple of things. But Rev, before we get into it, why don't you tell people a little bit about yourself?
Well, as it relates to this, I grew up in northern Wisconsin, which was probably, I guess, about 60% Lutheran and about 75% Catholic. And then sort of our family with our church, which was very, very small minority, obviously. And I grew up in the Christian Science church, very, very small church, but people were very devout and had a pretty strong presence all over the country, though, actually. And then when I was younger, I spent a few years in my early educational effort in the Lutheran parochial school from 3rd to 6th grade. So I got a good taste of that. And then pretty much stayed in the church, and not in a very committed sort of way, but it was what I identified as. And then after college, worked in Christian publishing for about 15 years. And during that time, I would just tell people I was in between churches, and but really just didn't identify with any of that.
So when you say Christian publishing, tell me a bit more about that. What do you mean by that?
Sure. So I studied electrical engineering in college, and and this is way back in the early 90s. I had a buddy of mine who we were talking one day about, and this, of course, is before there was any content delivered on the internet. In fact, this predates CD-ROMs being used for software delivery, strictly for music. And back then, if you had games, they'd come on like 72 different floppy disks.
I remember them.
I'm not fun about that. And they'd be like, okay, enter disk 36, and it'd sit there and click and word. Then you'd have to go for another 5 minutes. It'd be like, okay, enter disk 24. So that's what we were dealing with. And I had a buddy, he knew a guy who was a pastor and had this massive library. He said, it'd be cool to put all this in an electronic searchable format. So we kind of figured out a way of indexing all these books, because the only search feature that they had back then was kind of like a find, which you type in a word, and there was, of course, no like Boolean, any sort of Boolean abilities for that. You type in find, and it would just come up here, look at this word, look at this word, look at this word. So you had to literally still go through the whole text. So basically what we did is we indexed every single word, kind of like the Strong's numbers, which anybody here on my super faithful Christian followers will know what a Strong's concordance is. But basically, they assigned a number to every Greek and Hebrew word that appears in the Bible, and then indexed those numbers. So we kind of did the same thing, but just did every goddamn word. And then, So basically, all the words were already discovered. And instead of searching the text, you're searching the words. And this was breaking technology back in the early 90s. And, had I known porn would have been better, I probably would have went that way. But this was making some good headway. And so what we did is we started a company and started working, because, again, aside of adult bookstores, there's Christian bookstores, right? And there was a need for these people that had these massive, massive libraries and publishers being able to deliver their content in a more research-friendly way. So it was a real good fit, and I ended up working with just about all of the major, in some fashion, publishers at the time. And I learned a lot about the books and the industries. And I have always been a big fan of books. I've always liked books. I think books are amazing. I think I like some of them. I don't like some of them, kind of like my kids. But at the end of the day, they are, to sort of shit all over what someone wrote 2,500 years ago. I just think it's the wrong approach. I think it's amazing that whatever we have from that era, the problem isn't with the books. The problem is being so arrogant to think like some dude 2,500 years ago was writing for me today in my little home in Tennessee. But that's what that guy was writing for. Not for him, not for his needs. It was for me 2,500 years later. The problem isn't with the book or the authors. It's with people thinking that this applies to them.
Yeah,
much like the Constitution, just not as
So the reason we actually brought you on today was because you, tying into everything that you said, you actually mentioned that you grew up in Christian Science. And it was something that Dave and I haven't really heard much of anything past reading a wiki page on. We mentioned last week when we had Emerson on that generally in the UK you have like three major types of Christianity. You had Catholicism, you had Protestants, and you had Church of England, which is basically Protestant light. You do have a few others, churches around. You do see sort of like Baptists and Quakers and Jehovah's Witnesses and stuff like that, but not to such a degree. But there are so many different kinds that you hear sort of coming out from America and all these different names for things. And you're just like, oh, well, what is this? What's the difference? And some of them are actually really, really different from other types of Christianity. I mean, especially when you go down the lines of things like young earth creationism, anything biblical literalism or anything like that. It's very, very, very different from any sort of Christianity that we would have grown up around. And you said Christian Science, and you did make it clear that didn't really have anything to do with science.
Or Christianity. But, that's always kind of one of my, pet peeves about the whole fallacy things. And, there's people start throwing out the whole no true Scotsman. And I do think in the course of making an argument, you do have to pay attention to that. But if you're just categorizing things, at some point you got to draw some boxes and boundaries around what this means. Otherwise, anybody could say it and be it. And, I think if you poll the majority of Christians, one of the things I think that just has to happen is you have to believe Jesus died to redeem people from their sins. And if you don't believe that, which I never did, then you're not a Christian. Now, and I don't think if I said something, about my beliefs in that, it would be fair to say, well, this is what Christians believe, because it's not. So I always say there wasn't anything scientific about it, and truly there wasn't anything Christian about it either. And the whole thing sort of started from the back in the 60s or 70s, when there was a big sort of approach towards mind controlling disease and sort of like it's all in your head, right? So those people really ran with that back then. And initially wasn't very theistic at all. And they were coming from more of a standpoint of this is actual science. And you have to kind of remember that back in 1860s, medicine wasn't there. Most of your doctors were trying their best or were flat out quacks. So sometimes prayer or doing nothing was the best option, because maybe you took a chance of actually doing yourself more harm by seeing somebody that's just selling you snake oil, as it were.
Or the way they used to cure headaches, they used to think that there was a demon in your head, and you'd go to the barber, wouldn't you? And you'd get your skull broken into to let the demons out.
Yeah. They did some wacky shit back then. And so a lot of people, and with that comes a lot of grief, right? A lot of loss. So people start looking at, hey, what can we do different? So they sort of went with this idea that disease is a manifested by mind, or by sort of a bad way of thinking, and I think we all kind of understand that. Like, maybe if a kid has a big test they haven't studied for, they create an upset stomach and now they don't feel good, and we say it's all in your head, or you're nervous and now your nerve is kind of manifesting itself, and there's real things that happen, but they took it way too far. But there was a big group of this. So getting back to what you were saying about England, I think the problem was that you folks kicked all your nutters out of your country that were too crazy for your religion and sent them over here. And that's just kind of how it all started. And then, of course, none of those guys could get around or get along. So then they started 13 different churches, 13 different colonies, and so on and so forth. So we didn't start out real well. We weren't given the best guys to build this country. That's just the way it is. They should have just went with the natives, and they didn't. So here we are. But there is Christian Science in England, and I know there's some pretty famous English people that were Christian Scientists. I'm pretty sure Margaret Thatcher was, and I think 3 of the 4 Beatles were. But I'm just kidding. But so it started out as sort of more of a non-theistic thing. So Mary Baker Eddy, who founded Christian Science, was a student of one of these people, and she came from a Protestant background and basically worked her Protestant influence into this sort of mindset, and probably made it more sort of mainstream, because now we're talking about the Jesus, we're talking about God, we're talking about all these things that we're kind of already familiar with, and now it's kind of churchy, so it's not some weird guy in a barn telling me that I manifested my broken leg. Because I think she fell on the ice or something and broke her leg, and this dude was like, yeah, that's just a manifestation of your bad thinking process. And she's like, oh, really? I thought it was a broken leg. And they're like, no, it's your thought process. If you have a bad thought process, you're going to experience this sort of thing. And then she's like, well, let me wrap some Bible verses into this. And boom, the church blew up. Like, it was a huge, huge, huge thing right around the turn of the century. And, people like Mark Twain, for example, wrote a whole series of articles taking Christian Science to task in some pretty famous magazines, and then later compiled it all into a book. Or I don't know that he did, but someone did, compiled it into a book. But it got the attention of some pretty big hitters out there at the time. And then it grew and grew and grew. And then basically over the course of a few decades, because no one went to doctors, a lot of them died, and it's kind of dwindled down.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, it's not something that's really been on my radar at all. And I don't know if it has yours as well, Dave.
No, it's like you hear bits and pieces about it. Like, mostly what we get over here is just these people left their kids to die. Look at how bad it is. And that's mostly what I know about it, yeah.
And that was a pretty recurring thing back in the late 80s and the 90s. You'd bring some parents up in front, and the whole idea was, do these people as parents have the right to, and a lot of these poor children are dying from things that were very curable, like ear infections and just shit that went way off the rails. It wasn't like they had, terminal cancer and someone's just throwing a Hail Mary out there, or it was things like, oh my God, this could have been prevented. And they really took up, what does these people's religious rights, how far do they extend? So it was kind of an interesting, outside the kids dying, political conundrum to discuss. And yeah, that would sort of surface about once every year. And then the other thing is that the church produced a paper called the Christian Science Monitor that was actually very, very well received and respected and won multiple Pulitzer Prizes, and was kind of a staple of the Washington and news. And so a lot of people would see those newspapers and the magazine racks and stuff like that. But yeah, the big thing is you see it in the TV every now and then about, because like I say, I never got medicine or vaccines or anything like that. And it wasn't anything to do with politics or like it is today. It was purely, that's just the shit we believe.
So do you think it's quite different today as it was when you were growing up in it then?
You mean the church?
Yeah.
Yeah, because they're all dead now.
Yeah,
so I'm sort of like just kind of, and I make fun of them, but it's kind of true. I've seen a lot of people pass away before they should have. So I think that has an effect, of course, on the people that died. And then the others kind of, that is a pretty big slap in the face to like, hey, the results aren't justifying the process.
Yeah, that's fair. So what would you say? I mean, if you could nail it down to the core beliefs of, say, Christian Science, you've gone over sort of how it was created and how there was this Protestant influence within it. But what would you say that the main beliefs within Christian Science are, and how they differ from, let's call it, regular Christianity?
Okay, yeah. So the first thing is I think always it all stems from kind of a Gnostic approach, which means Gnostic meaning to know something, not to know whether it exists or not. So the whole point is to understand God as he exists, not understanding what pisses him off and what sex things you can and can't do and what foods pisses him off or clothes you wear or why he did this or why he did this. So the first thing is,
sorry, is this along the lines of, say, the Gnostics, as in the sect of Christianity that's said to have special knowledge of God?
Yeah, exactly. The knowledge, again, it's not looking at doctrine, it's not looking at appeasement. So you look at God in a very non-personal way. And that's one of the first things that really grinds the traditional Christian, is that God is not personified. God doesn't make decisions. God doesn't choose to save this person or save that person. God, so it's about understanding God. And the best, and I've said this before, but the best way I can describe it is very much like the first two episodes of Star Wars, and especially Empire Strikes Back, where Luke is struggling to understand the Force. You don't pray to the Force for it to grant you your wishes, or the Force doesn't care about who wins the football game between the Jedis and the Empire or whatever. It's all about using that power for both sides. Darth Vader didn't pray to the Force. Luke Skywalker didn't pray to the Force. It was all about trusting and having faith in that to get to where you needed to be. And it's not a perfect analogy, but it's very, very similar. So again, the Force is not a character, right? There's no person there. There's no decision making. There's no judgment or heaven or hell, or it just is. So it's you choose to align yourself with it and understand it rather than trying to appease it. So that's like the first big difference. The second big difference would be that Jesus is not. So the Christian Science, of course, rejects the Trinity because that makes absolutely no sense to anybody. But they just decided not to pretend like they understood it. So they're just like, no, this is silly. But Jesus isn't divine, right? Jesus was born and essentially was a way shower. So Jesus might be Yoda, right? And Jesus is this guy who just figured the shit out better than anybody else and provided us a path. Because even in the Bible, and Christian Science will point to this, is that Jesus says, greater works will he do, meaning somebody in the future, than I. And he says that in like John 14, insinuating that Jesus didn't do the best that could be done, which if he was God, it would have been, right? I mean, how could any of us exceed God? So Christian scientists kind of hang their hat on that. They're like, look, Jesus even said that, hey, I'm just paving the path here. There's going to be bigger and better things done by the people that follow me. So therefore, Jesus is just sort of a way shower, not a part of God, not some confusing father-son thing. It was just a guy that figured it out and, showed us that his power came from God and he was just a conduit. And again, in the Bible, there's no instances of like a prolonged healing or medicine or it was all faith, right? Like the one guy that you probably heard, the Roman centurion that was walked up to Jesus and he's like, hey, my daughter's going to die. I need you to help her. And Jesus is like, okay, let's get the hell over there. And the Roman centurion's like, nah, man, you're Jesus Christ. You just say she's healed and she's healed. You don't got to do shit. Just say it and it's done. And then Jesus says, well, this guy's got the greatest faith of anybody. And the girl is healed. Just get shit out of my way now. And everybody goes on their way. But so again, he didn't even have to lay hands on her. He didn't have to touch her. There was nothing divine or magical about him. He was just like, okay, I understand it. And it would be like the same thing too. Like if Luke would have came down with leprosy or something like that in the Dagobah swamp, Yoda would have been just like booga booga, and then boom, he'd have been healed. It wouldn't have been, medicine or exercise or diet or anything like that. So Christian scientists say a healing from God has to be it has to be, because God is all powerful, and that's what it is. So again, we're getting kind of away from the whole God chose to heal this person, God, because he's got mysterious ways, did this over here and that over there. It's just people are adhering themselves better or worse to God and his principles. And it's sort of like the whole, omniscient thing with the omnipotence, right? And people kind of get all sideways on that. But the way, Christian Science looks at it is that it isn't that God is all-knowing in the sense that he knows all the future and knows all the past, and like a human would. It's just like if there was a collection of all the knowledge in the universe in a book, God is that book. So the all is more like an encompassing thing rather than like, God knows who's going to win the Super Bowl in 5 years. And then if he did, he wouldn't need all these other guys to raise money from him because he'd just go down there, bet it, and win it all. But rather, it's like all the knowledge that is there, because that's not knowledge, right? So the things that haven't happened yet aren't knowledge. So why would God know? Why would he need to? So, and then the powerful is the same sort of, aspect of all the power in the universe comes from God. Not that God is all powerful and that he can do these weird philosophical argument sort of things. It's just like, no, this is all the power that comes in our universe. Kind of like I always like to say, it's kind of like a kid with an ant farm, right? From the ant's perspective, that child has all the power in their universe. So does it mean the child can do whatever it wants? It just means all the power that exists in our universe comes from this one place. So those are very different things. So there's no heaven, no hell. That pisses the Christians off because where's the sense of urgency, right? And And that's one thing I've always said to the Baptists is I've always been like, dude, sell me on heaven. Because like I sort of get hell. Like I understand like you fuck shit up in your life, you go to the bad place, right? I get that. That makes sense. And I'm like, you know what? I'm there because they're going to have processes, they're going to have systems down there, and that's where I'm going to fit in. Like I could fit into middle management there and be like, look, dude, you're jamming all these guys with the ash of the pitchfork all day long. I'm going to find a way to do it just a little better and a little faster, move me up the rank a little bit, and I'm good for all eternity. I'll help you find efficiency. I'll help you make better paths and stuff. So like hell made sense to me. But heaven, like, never made any sense. It's like you live a life, you devoid yourself of everything to what? Go to church all the time. And I'm like, sell me on it. Sell me on heaven. What about heaven makes any sense? And that was always something to me. So the way the Christian Scientists look at it is more like heaven and hell are things that exist right now in our lives. So it's a silly kind of thing, but like, if you say your kid was in bed, right, and you were going to come across the room to give him a hug or kiss or whatever, good night, or tuck him in, and you're like, okay, I'm going to turn a light on so I can see, you're less likely to hurt yourself, right? So if you just go over there in the dark, you're going to step on his damn Lego bricks or something like that. So it's the whole, that's your hell, is because you didn't, turn the light on, so to speak. You created your own misery. So right. Hell and heaven are the things that we are existing in right now. And then over the course of our lifetime, which goes past this lifetime, then it's this journey of reducing the suffering that you do through better thought and better alignment with this, mind, this divine mind.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, who was it?
It doesn't make any sense.
No, hell is other people.
If it made sense, I'd still be doing it.
No, I don't mean it like that. I mean, I sort of, I understand it in it being a less literal term, like actually taking away the mysticism from it, making it a bit more realistic. I mean that side of it does actually, for someone that doesn't believe in any of this stuff, it seems again like it's if you turn it into the metaphor and talk about it being within your life, it's a descriptor for how your life's going. I'm in hell right now, or I'm in heaven right now. So from that, in a poetic sense, it makes more sense to me than the literal heaven and hell.
Yeah, and we certainly are responsible for most of our own misery, right? The whole, we made our bed, now we got to sleep in it. I mean, that's just kind of life. So it's just people, working into that, where the heaven and hell thing is really an urgency thing, kind of in a sales sort of way. Why go to church? Because, well, you're afraid of hell. And I was just always afraid of heaven and more church.
That's interesting, actually. I don't think that there are many people who are actually afraid of going to heaven.
Oh man, I mean, because I spent a lot of time in church, and that's like, let's go out and live our lives, and let's be cool to everyone and be groovy and everything, and I don't need to learn any more damn hymns, and then it's not even like you guys don't even have the good music, or the good pews or the good service. And then they're just like, well, the streets are paved in gold. And then it's like, well, if the streets are paved in gold, then what? What are we buying?
I'll just go and rub the tarmac.
Yeah. Yeah, can you imagine what the association fees are up there if the streets are paved in gold? How much you got to pay that guy now? And Jesus or Peter or one of those guys comes around, it's like, yeah, we're going to have to raise it by 7.5%. These gold streets here aren't going to shine themselves. They're not going to be lacquer on them, or I don't know. You probably don't put lacquer on gold. I don't know.
I wouldn't know what goes on gold. No.
Yeah, neither.
So
It makes me happy to think at least we got cars up there, maybe.
Yeah. But would you need cars? Could you just teleport?
Well, there you go. But you got to use the streets, right?
Yeah, exactly.
If you're going to be like, we paid for this with our association fees, so we got to use it now.
So you got a few questions coming in before we continue.
Okay.
Kemo says, do you have any thoughts on Eddy's malicious animal magnetism thing?
Yeah, so animal magnetism. So okay, I'll take it a step back. So in the Christian Science Church, there's no such thing as a pastor or a preacher or a clergy of any sort. Right. So there are what they call readers, and they're elected by the church, and there's 2 readers every Sunday. One guy reads the Bible and the King James, and the other person reads passages from the Christian Science and Health. So, and that's the other thing, is the Science and Health is like the textbook to that religion. So you got 2 books. You got then that's it. That is it. Not no commentaries or anything. It's all right there. King James Bible, Science and Health, 2 books, and one person reads. And there's like 6 little groups, and that's been this way forever. And these verses are picked by the mother church. So very literally, every Sunday, every single Christian Science church is the exact same message. No variation. In the beginning, there might be like announcements or like, quit putting your shit on the thing, or, church administrative kind of stuff. Quit messing around with the organ. Quit putting quit playing Iron Maiden on the record player back there, stuff like that. But once you got to the actual the sermon part, it was reading of those verses, same in every single church. So every week, 52 weeks, we never got a week off. There was a topic that was the same every year. So you did the same 52 topics every single year. One of those was animal magnetism. So I'm like, 8, 9 years old. I'm like, I don't know what the hell animal magnetism is. I think it was like a Judas Priest album, right? Or something. I mean, there was one, I said, and I'm not making this, there's one of them, those kind of hairband, kind of metal bands from the 80s that had a title like Animal Magnetism or something like that. And I thought, oh, maybe these guys are Christian Scientists, but they weren't. But yeah, so that's not something I'm terribly familiar with, but basically gets away from our urges and sort of disqualifying the idea that we have to do things because we're animals. Like we have like a need to protect, a need to do this, a need to do that. We feel these things rather than, we submit to animal magnetism rather than, divine mind. So it's really doing away with humanity, what we are as people, what we are as humans, and saying that is causing you to have all these illnesses, because believing that you have to do things just because you're flesh and bones is why you're getting sick and dying, rather than, believing in something else. So that's a pretty specific question for somebody. That's pretty good stuff there. Whoever asked that question. Yeah,
that was Kim O'Mackie.
Every 1 weekend we got to talk about animal magnetism. I don't recall a whole lot of it.
Is there any particular service that you do remember from it? Like, is there one?
No, they're the worst. They are. I mean, it is like going to like stumbling, turn your hungover, as it often was when I was 9, into a like lecture hall for like accounting law 300 level taught in another language. That's what it was like. It was just like listening, and it wasn't like I would go to my friends' church, like I'd have a sleepover and go to their church, and I'd listen. I'd be like, okay, this makes sense. This guy is talking about this idea. He's tying these verses in it, and then he's given us this kind of tying it all together. We missed all that tying it all together. So it was just like, basically, I was just like, well, I guess we got to do better thinking or something like that. We don't have like, there's no and the science in health. If people always call the Bible word salad, the science in health is definitely the hold my beer. I'm going to give you some word salad. Yeah, that I remember when I was a kid. I take a dictionary and I'd write, like, I'd see a word, didn't know what it meant. I'd write the little definition right there so I didn't have to look it up again. And holy shit, that lady used a lot of different words that didn't need to be used. But it's word salad in the biggest way, So the Bible at least is semi-coherent, and I never understood like a lot of commentaries that you will see about the Bible. They'll say, here's a verse, here's our interpretation of this verse. And, it's like if someone said, well, I don't understand this idea of income tax. And they were like, Judas Priest was a band of the 1980s that, produced a lot of albums. And you're just like, okay,
Bit off the wall.
Yeah, it's very off the wall.
Just a bit. We've also got one from Lone Wolf. He says, were you a practicing member during the Twitchell trial when the children died due to a bowel obstruction? He thinks that was in the 1990s. And did that have any effect on your beliefs at the time?
Not really. So sort of the upside to this sort of way of being brought up was as always questioning my thought, always kind of struggling with a lot of these things. And so I tried to believe like God was groovy, but you had the biggest issue I have with a lot of Christianity devalues the life that we're living now. So you are like, well, these people should be able to raise their kids the way they want to, which isn't really that's a social belief perhaps. And if anything, I've changed on that belief. But I really was like,
oh, we've lost you, Rev. Your audio's suddenly gone. You gotta love live streaming.
Quiet.
You were perfectly fine, and then it just disappeared.
okay.
Oh,
there you go. You're back.
Coming back.
Okay. I said a bunch of stupid shit anyway, so it's good. But I think you worry more about protecting the church than you are about protecting the people. And I always felt like your results don't justify your process. If you aren't good at it, if you're healing people, then do that. If you're not healing people, then don't do that. So where because I would get in arguments with, people that had just like no idea why you would ever do this. And so if my beliefs ever changed, it was about sort of the state needs to step in and say, you can't let your kid die. So, I might have not been religious, felt like the state can't do that. That wasn't necessarily tied to, I think, because like you could be like libertarian and be like, government, get out of my yard, regardless of what your intentions are. Mm-hmm. So my beliefs definitely changed that way. but I never was convinced like these people aren't going to die because they did, So I just felt like, hey, if you can reduce the suffering in your life a little bit every day by understanding things a little better, by understanding people a little better, super duper, but you ain't walking on water just yet. Let's not pretend we are.
That's fair. Yeah. And a good answer too. So yeah, thank you. As I said, guys, if anyone else has any more questions, please at me. I'm really engaged in the conversation, so I am trying to focus on that more than I am on the chat today. So I will scan through for any ats that come through and put them up on screen.
I'm trying to keep an eye out as well, but yeah, like I'm engaged in the conversation, so it's quick glances over and yeah.
Yeah, occasionally you see something and you say, "Oh, look, Craig's come in. Hi, Craig. I probably missed you." But yeah. So, go on, Dave.
I was just going to say, I think that might be one of the reasons why Christian Science has never really properly taken off over here, is because the government would step in and say you're doing harm to your children. Like, we're not like America where you have so much religious freedom you can let your kid die. We would literally step in and take the kids out. And, like, I know it's happened to Jehovah's Witnesses where there's been forced blood transfusions and things like that.
Yeah, we don't have the separation of church and state, really, and it does go both ways.
Yeah.
So it can be, I guess, beneficial as well.
Yeah, and of course, the purpose of Christian Science wasn't to kill a bunch of kids. It just kind of happened.
Just happened, yeah.
Yeah, just organically.
Yeah, not laughing at kids dying, obviously. Just have to throw that out there. Yeah, so it seems that like from what you're saying, is very, very different. Now, you mentioned that there were two readers, and they were elected by the church. Were they elected every week, or were they elected each year, or what? Oh, you've lost your audio again. How weird.
I'm guessing Discord's doing to him what it normally does to me.
Yeah, but he's still moving. Usually when you usually freeze up completely. I don't know what's going on, Rev. I do apologize. You just keep singing, and as soon as you we can hear you, we'll let you know. Oh, you're almost there in the background now. It's sort of coming back. I don't know what's going on. Yeah. I tell you what, if you go into the settings on Discord, I don't know if you can see that. It should have your mic settings, and I don't know if you can see if that's working properly or not.
It's a Christian Science conspiracy. They've hacked him to stop him releasing all the secrets.
You must join the church to find out about us. I thought it was only the Scientologists that did that.
Christian Science? Scientologist? Same thing.
Oh.
It's got science in it.
He'd be fuming if he could respond.
Let me see here.
Oh, you're starting to come through. Yeah, so I can sort of hear you, but you're very far away. So in your user settings, there's the voice and audio, and that should have like input, output volume, and your voice activity. If it's not picking up your voice randomly, you can change your input sensitivity to go down a bit. Sometimes when it's automatic, it won't pick you up for some strange reason. I've actually got a problem since I upgraded my computer where it doesn't like it at all, and I have to turn the sensitivity way down. I don't know if that'll help you. And if you click let's check on the mic test thing, you should be able to hear yourself. It might cut you off from us briefly, but it should help you get involved and hear yourself. Oh, so I heard, can you? I assume you were saying, can you hear me now? So not quite. I heard, can you? Yeah, nothing's coming through yet, I'm afraid.
I turned off noise suppression.
Yeah, so the noise suppression can cause problems, as well can the echo cancellation sometimes as well.
Right, I turned off noise suppression, and I turned the sensitivity down.
Yeah, we can hear you, but you sound a bit like a robot.
Maybe.
Yeah, so I would suggest that I don't know what's happened, but I would suggest that there's something that's happened to the mic. If you are you using the mobile app or the desktop app?
Mobile.
Okay. Try this. Go out and in again, and it might reset the settings.
All
right. But yeah, so Lone Wolf has just said, whilst we're waiting for Rev to go out and in again, what flavour of human babies are we having for supper? Now, my choice of baby tonight has been barbecue. Who doesn't love a barbecue?
Right, that work?
Yes.
Perfect.
You're back.
All right, there you go. Thank you, Mary Baker Eddy.
Right. Okay. Cool. Apologize for that, everybody who is watching live. But there you go. What's a sci-fi stream without some?
They're used to me cutting in and out all the time, so.
To answer your question about the readers were elected by the church, but really it was about who wanted to do it, and were they able to stand up and speak and that sort of thing. It wasn't like any sort of like status or most people would choose not to be. So they would just it was like a responsibility that got rotated, but they were officially elected, and most churches would have a nice way to figure out, like, well, rotate people around, and some want to do it, some don't want to do it. Obviously there would be some degree of preparation. So if you don't want to do that 52 weeks out of the year, so they would, and then some of them just, maybe it's a small congregation and you had to do it. So it really wasn't any like being elected as like a deacon or something, or a bishop, or, there was no status with it or anything like that. You did get to use the jet, though, at least once a month.
So I suppose it's, in a way, it's kind of like where you had that person at school who liked to read out the register for the teacher, or something similar to that. There wasn't really any status to it. They just wanted to do it, and they enjoyed doing that sort of thing.
And someone had to do it. So there was, someone would have to pick up the ball and run with it. So, but it wasn't like I don't think anybody, like, as a kid said, I want to be a Christian Scientist reader. If I go to school and don't take my medicine, I'll be able to do that someday.
Fair. There was something I remember you mentioning, which was around the gender of God. So generally, through Christianity, God is seen as male, our Father who art in heaven, he, and so on, all that. But you said that that's not the same necessarily within Christian Science.
No, in fact, I believe in earlier drafts of the Science and Health that she actually referred to God as she, but the general way that God is referred to is Father, Mother. So God does all the roles of father and a mother. So not necessarily about male or female, but as our father or mother, as our divine parent does both the roles. But again, getting away from the total personification of God. God is not like a human. God is not. Um, it doesn't. Isn't. And if someone was on the ball and they said, "Well, weren't we created in this image and likeness?" They'd say, "Yes, but this is not that. Our image is ideal and spiritual, not material. God is not material, right? Our true essence of being is spiritual and ideal. It's like idealism in a lot of ways. So God is ideal. So are we. We are in His image. This isn't it right here.
Right.
So you can't think of God as having male or female. It's mother, father, mother, God.
Almost more like describing it in a gender role rather than it actually being gendered or sexed.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, that was back in 1890. So that was, and of course that didn't sit very well with a lot of your Christians at the time too. And and the funny thing is not really funny, but I have been threatened eternal damnation way more by Christians when I was a Christian Scientist than I was with an atheist.
That is interesting.
I think I remember one time as an atheist, and I've always been out front with people about it, and they said something about going to hell, and I said, "Man, I hope you're right," and we left it at that. But when I was in fourth grade, I'll tell you guys kind of a funny story that shaped me. I was in this Lutheran school because my mom felt like it would have a better education for me. And, we made no qualms. I'm not a Lutheran. We go to a different church, but we go to this school. So, and this is back in the days of cursive writing. Penmanship was a class. So we had a class where you had to write cursive and you get graded on it. And it so happened this, I was in fourth grade, but the teacher that taught penmanship was the choir teacher. And every day we'd sit there and do practice cursive writing. So like a standard assignment would be go home, get a recipe card, because you had to practice fractions and stuff like that. So get one of your mom's cooking recipe cards and transcribe it in cursive writing. That would be an assignment. Okay. So, all these various things we'd have to find at home and then do a cursive writing on. So this one day she's like, go get your baptismal notice and copy it down. So I'm like, what's a baptism notice? And she said, well, when you were baptized, they made a little notice card, celebrate the event. Your mom has it. It's probably in a scrapbook. Get it and just copy it. And I'm like, what's a baptized? And there was like, oh, that's when you were a baby and you were put in the water. And it's like, yeah, I'm pretty sure that didn't happen. and she's like, oh, so you're telling me you're not baptized? And I'm like, that's exactly what I'm telling you. And she said, well, you're going to get an F for the assignment and you're going to burn in hell. And I was like, okay. And does this mean I don't have to do this anymore? And so I come home and I get this, progress report or whatever it was. And my mom was like, well, why did you get an F? And that's because I wasn't baptized. And she's like, well, what do you mean you weren't? And of course you weren't baptized, but how did you get an F for not being baptized? And I said, that failed at penmanship because I wasn't baptized. So my mom gets down to the choir rooms teacher. She does, this kind of stuff and goes in there, guns blazing. And I could hear my mom just and this lady going back and forth and about my eternal well-being. And frankly, neither one of them cared about that, but they were fighting about it. And I'm listening back and forth and the grades and this and that. And then I heard my the choir teacher go, "But his handwriting is so bad." And I was just like, "Oh, okay. Well, there you go. I'm going to go to hell because of bad handwriting." The baptism thing, that wasn't on me, but the bad handwriting, all me, all day long. I'll take my eternal damnation for that. But that happens a lot, and then finally, my mom said, "Well, we have had enough of this. Let's put you back in the traditional public schools," and so on and so forth. But yeah, I definitely had more, and that's the thing too, that I always think the atheist community gets a little skewed on is most apologetics, and especially traditionally, were within Christianity. Back then they were not writing about, they didn't care about non-believers. They cared about losing parishioners from one church to another. And apologetics were written for Christians, to Christians, by Christians, and they were about like little topics like, do we believe in infant baptism? So there's all these books like an apology of pedobaptism or something like that, which is a bunch of church guys arguing about whether or not infant baptism is biblically sound or not, or is it believer baptism? That's where apologetics really, really started. And sure, there were people that didn't believe it. All this was going back and forth, and I think today it might be a little different. Certainly, Twitter kind of skews things a little, but even if I think you get outside and kind of in the real world, most of the apologetics and kind of combative stuff, and I certainly saw this in the publishing, was like, if you want to see Christians go after each other, start arguing about which translation is the best. Get a whole bunch of them in these pompous asses in a room and be like, "What do you think about Zondervan's Bible?" And then just leave the room. And you will get so many people arguing about the most minute details, because for these publishing houses are built on translations. There are so many translations, and the reason for it is because most Christians own 6-7 Bibles to compare, readings of a verse or a translation of a verse, and they want to know, what the New King James says, what the King James said, what the NIV says, all of these, Living Word or whatever. So most Christians have 4 or 5 different translations, and they go back and forth. And some just like the King James. I grew up on the King James. It's just what I'm familiar with, but I recognize it's not the best translation. It's just what I sort of rings in my head.
It's interesting. I've noticed this as well. I've actually, King James was a common one that I heard, and I've noticed, especially if you say, well, the King James, not the greatest translation, is it? You look at so many things were changed and so on and so forth. I'm sort of skirting around it. But someone will come in and defend the King James to the teeth. Oh, no, it's the best. It's this. It's the purest one. And you're like, yeah, was it though?
Well, it's just not, because there was so much of the manuscripts that were found after the King James was written. So it just isn't. It's just, unless you believe, this is, because God, put his hand on this one, this is why it's the best. But from a manuscript argument, there's no argument that it's not the best translation. If you're looking for accuracy, then it was the more newer ones. The newer ones have better tools, they have better research, they have better scholarship. If you're in that whole thing, the newer ones just are definitely better. The older ones just have kind of a nice ring to them, to me. But there is, and I noticed someone here was saying that most people are in the King James, and there are some definitely King James only churches, and there's definitely some people that really strongly adhere to it, but most of them care about what, the translations, because at the end, if it helps them get what they need to get across, they're going to use that. Or if the message is going to be that much more digestible for their congregation, they're going to use that one. They're not going to let people walk out of the church because the these and thous are messing them up with the KJV. Some churches definitely will. Vast majority of them embrace a newer translation because it's easier digestible for the.
Which makes sense. And in fact, I know some Christians go to the lengths where they actually learn Hebrew and Greek so they can read as original translation as they can, and translate it themselves and have like a dictionary and go, right, this word can be translated 6 different ways. If I do it this, it means this. Okay, so it only makes sense in these 2 ways. It could mean this or this. So from context, we can see this Bible's done it this way, this one's done it that way. What actually seems right, and I think that's one of the issues that I think a lot of atheists have, is about the whole translation thing. And they may well have only read one translation, and there are problems with translation. And as you mentioned, like lots of documents were missing over the years, added to later, and so on and so forth as well.
Yeah, and that's the biggest problem with the King James is the scholarship wasn't there. It was written for a particular person, kingdom thing. That was it, and it wasn't. They just didn't have what we have available today for manuscripts. So it wasn't that. I also noticed that Craig Reed was saying that I was an apologist, and that's just not true.
No, I think
I was a terrible one. and back in the 18th century and the 19th century, you see a lot of books that are apologies, and they're very much written from Christians to Christians, because honestly, those were the people that could read the text, that could read the original languages, these were not like meant for digestion of the layman, so to speak. They were meant for church, elites to do this back and forth. So it was a high level of scholarship. It'd be kind of like people arguing in a medical journal back and forth, right? Or it's not, they're not talking to the lay people. But yeah, those apologies, that's where a lot of them came from. They weren't meant to be read by non-believers. One of the ones that, like I said, infant baptism, so many books, and they're just like apology for infant baptism, and it was all about, do we baptize babies or do we baptize believers? And that was a huge, huge conflict in Christianity centuries ago, and still is today. But today, maybe they engage more, normal people. But back then, apologetics was significantly for, elites and churches going back at each other. Because there again, too, if you're like Jonathan Edwards and you're running 3 whole churches, you're not going to dick around with some Twitter atheists, right? No. You're going to be sitting there arguing with your equivalent, in a different church.
Yeah, I suppose it's like certain theistic arguments as well were designed to keep people who were starting to doubt their faith as well. So not just talking about the elites, but the people who were doubting their faith, like Pascal's wager. It wasn't.
I was just going to mention.
Oh yeah, no, go for it, Dave. You go for it.
One of the most famous that's often used is Pascal's wager, like Joe says, but it was never intended to convince the atheist. It was intended to convince those who wanted to believe but saw no good reason to believe. So Pascal's wager was originally intended to kind of push them over the edge.
Yeah.
And, it was never aimed at the atheist.
And that's a problem with reading the Bible, is for theists and atheists, is that urge to not kind of impose our views on the author rather than stepping back and just saying, what is this dude saying? You know, the atheist might be like, theist would be like, he's writing to tell me about Jesus Christ that's coming to 2,000 years before this guy's around, but and then another 2,000 years when I'm around or whatever, this is what he's writing about. And the atheist to me be like, well, this guy, the illiterate Bronze Age goat sheeper is just trying to grift all of his goat sheeping buddies, and nobody is looking at the understanding that person had or their true motivation and why they wrote it. And I look at some of these things and they're like, well, like I was reading one today where they were talking about Moses writing the Pentateuch and everything. And, and that's silly on so many levels, but, people were not evolved writers back then, regardless of their, fiction really doesn't start until like the 14th century. Like people wrote shit down, they told tales, but like true fiction, like making up characters, and there was like fables and metaphors and poetic stuff, but really not as sophisticated until you get to like the 14th century. So even though, regardless of what spin you put on it, these weren't really super. We give them a little more credit, I think, than they deserve, and that's not to be mean to them. It's just to say writing got better and better and better over the centuries. And again, people weren't writing for an art; they were writing for a reason. It wasn't to sell books. It wasn't to, but they had better things to worry about than grifting people through the written word, or whatever, So fiction really doesn't appear. So I always get a little sticky when people say, this is all fiction, which it's not. It's fictional, perhaps, but fiction really doesn't show up as a kind of a genre until like the 14th century.
We've had a similar conversation ourselves, haven't we, Dave? It may be a falsehood, but it's not a lie. It's not actual fiction because that's not the intent of it. It's
right.
a true telling of something that seems false, at least to us atheists and to most non-theists and non-Christians. So I think it's quite bad when a lot of us atheists do say it's a book of lies.
Right.
Because I think that's a misrepresentation of what the intent of the book. I think that there may be exaggerations in there of stories, and they may be intentional exaggerations at times. But I think for the most part, it's all written down with the best intent. And it's something that sort of stood the test of time, which is pretty amazing.
And people throw around the whole line, you see that meme about I was, with a baby, and it's like, hey, I was an atheist until someone lied to me. And I always feel like, did that person really lie to you? Or were they just being your parent? Were they wrong? Perhaps. Did they give you misinformation? Perhaps. But did they just flat out lie to you? No, probably not. And that's why, and again, the problem, even if the Bible is a book of lies, it's still just a book. It still is just a book. The problem is people giving it more power than it deserves or warrants.
Yeah, I agree with that. And just to clarify, no, babies are not atheists.
No,
they're just tasty snacks.
Babies. I tell you what, I had a grandson born a few months ago, and they're just terrible at debating too. And I've beaten them 9 out of 10 times in straight on debates. So if atheists are or babies are atheists, they're shit debaters. I'll tell you that right.
I suppose that's one other thing they have in common with like theists then.
Yeah, there you go.
Oh, the burn.
I would never insult anybody.
Yeah.
I insult whole groups of people.
There you go. Yeah, here's a good thing, though, about insulting babies. They don't have the best recourses. So,
And I'm pretty sure I could take one in a fight.
yeah, that's right. Yeah. Their coordination, not what they think it is. And, yeah, it's just like I say, it's pretty straight up easy to win debates with babies, and yeah. So I always felt like if people really hung on that, and again, I understand there's a whole philosophical thing there, but the thing I take more issue is did somebody lie to their child? As every theistic parent or atheistic parent, because we do tell our it's just I promise you're going to say something misinformation to your kids.
Of course.
That's everyone's going to do. But to say that you lied to them, then you're kind of you're drawing a line in the sand. You're basically saying, and I think the reason why they do it is to paint people that are believers and are no longer believers as victims. They don't like to leave the martyr thing behind. And I always say that too as an atheist, is we don't need no martyrs. We don't need people dying for us. We don't need martyrs. But they still kind of like to be the victim a little bit. And also it demonizes, the indoctrinators, right? It makes them look like bad, evil people rather than just a couple of parents doing what they thought was right at the time, because
I'd agree.
That's just, and it's unfortunate that anybody's parents can't give them the best nutritional guidance, the best educational guidance, the best social guidance. They just can't. So that's parenting, right? It's not,
definitely. I mean, if you turn it around, let's just say, right, one day that it's actually discovered there definitely is a god. I don't know. Let's pick one out. Let's just say it's the Hindu gods, right? They're the real gods. They're the ones that actually exist. Okay, so therefore, would we then say that atheists have been lying to their kids, or were they just wrong? And it's the same thing for Christians. They truly believe what they're saying. And another one, we all do lie to our kids, or at least most of us do, because we tell them Santa and the Tooth Fairy and all those fun things that kids experience.
Or that we love them.
Yeah. Questions coming from Honestly Atheist.
Okay.
So this is probably more one for Dave and me. I'll let Dave answer it, and then I'll repeat what he says. Are babies agnostics?
No, not according to the standard philosophical definition, because an agnostic is someone who has assessed the evidence and hasn't come to a conclusion one way or the other.
Yeah, so basically, when you're thinking about the different positions someone can hold, now don't get me wrong, people can identify how they like. I'm not saying you have to identify the way we prefer you to use these terms, but when you understand it, there are three sort of epistemic answers that you can give to any proposition. You can sort of lean towards or completely affirm that proposition, or you can go the other way and completely deny it, or you can suspend judgment and go, I'm not really sure, I can't evaluate this, there isn't enough for me to go on, or I'm undecided, or whatever. So they're the three positions, and that suspense of judgment is often known as being agnostic towards the proposition. And when you're talking about gods, there's obviously you're a theist or an atheist, whether you think it's true or false. Now I get it. There are these days non-theist and atheist can be go over each other, but let's not go with that. We're just using our terminology here. Or the philosophical terminology. There's other indirect answers as well. Like, for example, someone can be agnostic because they've evaluated what is proposed as a god and they found it incoherent, so it's therefore meaningless to consider because they don't see the truth value in it. It's so ill-defined. There's someone that doesn't care, so they don't think about it either. These are more indirect answers, so they're not answering the proposition directly, they're giving a sort of answer about the proposition. And then you've got people who are completely absent of a position on the proposition. They are innocent or ignorant of the proposition. So babies would sort of fall under this set because they lack the cognitive abilities to consider the proposition, understand what's going on, and hold or lack beliefs in regard to said proposition. The same could be said for someone that has never heard of the concept of gods. You know, it's something, if there was a siloed culture where it had never, gods had never come about, we'd again think of them as innocent or ignorant of that proposition. And again, they don't fall under the set of atheist or agnostic or any of these other terms because they haven't even considered the concept of gods or the proposition God exists.
Right. And I think it's just bad form to take a group of people, and especially for atheists, to say, this is what you people are. Like, you know, if you know, that's just bad form, you know, and they're babies, so they can't argue and tell you no, they're not. But at the same time, the principle to me is like, if there's another human, I don't have a right to say you are an atheist. You know, if they're 59 years old, I don't know if they're 5 or they're 2 or they're whatever. It's just bad form. That's a human being. They should be able to say what they are and express their beliefs. And just because they can't doesn't mean they don't have beliefs in their head. And of course, you know, I realize babies are dumb and everything, but there's a point where they start to have beliefs. When is that? And then is it not fair to say they are or they aren't? And I don't think it's fair to just assume that the base position is just atheism. You know, who knows? You know, so but I agree with everything Joe says, but I just think it's bad form to take a person and say, okay, you don't understand about gods or never heard about gods, therefore you're an atheist. That we wouldn't like that if that was done to us, you know, right?
It's part of our identity. It's part of people's identity. People, have a particular identity. They have certain things that they go along with. And I mean, if this was about, say, gender identity, you know, they'd be hard. You know, they'd be like, oh no, I wouldn't tell someone what their gender is. I let them tell me, and I'll use their terms. Yet you have so many people saying, no, I'll tell you that you're an atheist. No, I'll tell you that you're this. No, I mean, identity is a big part of it. And the whole thing, there's like the whole ist to ism link as well, which goes in there, you know, an ist is a follower of an ism. There is an ism in this one. So you can't be born following something. I mean, you think about it, things are more than just one thing that they lack. Even if you do go with that lack of belief definition, there's more to being an atheist than just lacking a belief in gods, even if that is the definition of atheist you use. Because you're still a person, for one, so it's already one more thing. But there's that istaism. You're following that. So you're actually acknowledging that. You're identifying as you're one of these things. So even in the lactheist sense of atheist, there is still a lot more to it than simply lacking a belief.
Well, I mean, one of the complaints that you often hear is when, say, a Christian says, well, you're not an atheist, you're an agnostic because you're suspending judgment. Most of those will say, you don't get to tell me what atheism is, you don't get to tell me what I am. But then they turn around and do the same thing to everybody else.
Yeah, you hear a common one. Only atheists get to define atheism. Okay, I'm an atheist. Draper's an atheist. Oppie's an atheist. There's a lot of atheists that use the terms these ways. So what do you say about that? Well, you're just wrong. Really? I'm not telling you have to use like these terms this way. The other day, I actually got it on Reddit. And someone was talking about agnostic atheism. It's something I don't like. And they said, do you identify it as this? And I responded saying, look, I respect anyone's right to identify how they like. I don't use these colloquial usages of agnostic and atheism. I use them how they're generally used within philosophy and da-da-da-da-da. And I don't think that we should tell others that we can't use them how they want to. So if that's how you want to be known, that's fine. But these are the reasons that I wouldn't use that. I just go by atheist. And the response I got was from someone else saying, the way you're using those terms is factually incorrect. Factually incorrect. And there's a lot of material out there that will say, no, these are very valid definitions. And that's not how language works. I mean, you could start using atheist to mean someone that eats cheese sandwiches if you really wanted to. And if it if it picked up, that could actually be a valid definition, because language is sort of defined through use. It wouldn't be a very useful way to define atheist, obviously. But,
and then the problem is that theism becomes the only position that requires thought. And and then what is that? Is that really the marketing you want to go with? That, if I'm a theist, at least I thought about my position and I came to a conclusion, and I did some work on this. And if you can just exist, and that's all it takes to be an atheist, well, and then how do you expect to take people and convince them that theism is wrong when all you got is, well, I was born and then I was lied to, and I guess, or something, I don't know. And
I just don't believe you anymore.
Jesus, and, let me find a meme here for you, I guess, And,
I'm just not convinced.
Some Sky Daddy, I guess. I don't know.
There's a lot of bad stuff that goes on in the online atheist community, unfortunately.
I sort of get and I think the other danger is that, Bertrand Russell always described himself as saying, practically, I am he said, I suppose I'm agnostic, but practically I'm an atheist. And I think what he meant, because, again, here's a guy that's talking in the philosophical circles that, he's talking about, I'm not going to disprove all my teapot gods, right? So maybe those exist. I don't know. And I'm open to it, right? But I'm not open to the Christian God, which is the one I have to deal with every single day. And I think theists, then they conflate this whole thing of I can't prove teapot gods don't exist, therefore I can't prove this God doesn't exist. And now you've sort of taken the whole theist argument and basically, kind of slapped yourself in the face with it by saying, I can't prove gods exist, because you conflated this philosophical idea with a God that is super defined, and there's 60,000 verses about him, and pretty easy to deal with, and that's the reality. Is and someone says, well, do you believe in the Hindu gods? I'm just I don't know. I've never considered them because it's not practical for me. I don't deal with it on a day-to-day basis. But the Jesus God, I got to deal with that guy all the time. So that's the one I talk about, and that's how I define myself, because nobody, outside of Bertrand Russell, sits around and thinks about gods and teapots. If you're in that philosophical, yes, you do, Dave. And God bless you for doing that. But that's not practical, right? That doesn't affect our social society. It doesn't. But it's good to think about these things, and that's why I always. One of the things that Christian Science kind of left on me is, there's a verse in Thessalonians, First Thessalonians, that says, "Pray unceasingly." And Paul says this, and it's "Rejoice evermore, pray unceasingly." And Christians take that to mean okay, we're supposed to be on, God, help me find my car keys. God, help the Buccaneers win this week. God, help this going. Help me get this promotion. And it's all these prayers of supplication. But, Christian Science, it's more of a wrestling with this philosophy, sort of like a metaphorical angel that Jacob wrestles, right? It's not that he wrestled him actually. Maybe he did. I think he probably might have beat him in 2 falls or 3 falls. But it was this idea of wrestling, I think, with his thoughts. And that is prayer. So this constant philosophical morality, how do I be better? How can I be better? Is something that, we do when we're walking down the street. This thing is always going in our heads. Like how can I do these things, or be a better father, be a better husband, be better this or better that, or just thinking about things to better understand things. And that's kind of where prayer comes from in a Christian Science thing. So when you had the guy on last week, and that was a brilliant young man, like I'd invest
He
in
is.
that. And he was talking about faith healing in that charismatic kind of Benny Hinn sort of thing. The faith healing that Christian Scientists do is all about prayer. And the results are pretty much the same, with just a lot less kind of goofy music and guys in bad suits. But it's like this prayer of understanding, like as if you can, and I think even as, and I'm not a philosopher like you guys to the level you guys are, but I think you think, and correct me if I'm wrong, that if you do put all the pieces together, there's going to be this harmony that you'll attain because you understand. I think, like, right, isn't that kind of the goal, is like, if I can figure out how morality works, and I can figure out how to best govern society and how to do this is all going to be harmonious. And that, I believe, is sort of the faith kind of aspect of it, that like, if I keep doing this, I will make things more harmonious. And it's not true. And then as I get older, I'm just way more absurdist. And I just think, yeah, just like, and that's, and it's funny too, because and one of the things I always like, I read the Bible more and I became an atheist, or I started reading modern physics and I became an atheist. Dude, for me, science fiction. And it was Kurt Vonnegut drawing pictures of buttholes and in his books, that I was just like, this is silly. And not just religion, but the arrogance of humanity in everything. Not religion is just one aspect of it, but the fact that Ted Cruz thinks he's smart, or Boris Johnson thinks he's like combed his hair once or whatever. But all that absurdity is not limited. It's in all of us. It's not just religion. And you see it from people when they just start talking from an elevated place. And I was listening to an audio recording of Breakfast of Champions. And it was recorded by who is that actor? They did the movie 20 years ago. It was like in the mind of kind of a very, very famous, prestigious actor. In the mind of he's kind of like Shakespearean type guy, and he still does stuff. I'm not doing a good job, but
he
in
was
a
in
movie, it
John
was like
Malkovich.
in the mind of John Malkovich. Yeah, that guy got it. John Malkovich. Yeah. So John Malkovich is doing this audible reading of Breakfast of Champions. And Vonnegut's got all these little etchings or cartoons in the book. And John Malkovich goes, it's a picture of a butthole. It looks like an asterisk. And I was just like, yeah, that's kind of life, right? I mean, it's just so absurd and so silly. And here's this great writer who's written all these works and has a this great mind, and he's drawn a picture of buttholes that look like asterisks. And I always just think that's what moved me away from religion than anything I read in the Bible or physics books or anything like that.
It pretty much sums everything up. It's kind of why I approach like the streams in philosophy in the way that I do.
Oh, have we lost you, Rev? I think we did.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's daving tonight.
See, speaking of absurdism.
So, you're back. Are you back? Oh, I think you're gone again.
I'm kind of impressed that you guys are able to pull John Malkovich together of my shitty description.
If you'd have said Con Air, everybody would have got it.
Yeah. Where were we? I've been completely thrown off.
Yeah.
Completely thrown off course.
But he's got this such a good voice.
I think you've frozen again. You're having connection problems all of a sudden, Rev? I think so.
I wonder if Discord just does it to the last person to join each session.
You guys are freezing up on my end.
Yeah, you're freezing up on our end too. I was wondering if you're having connection difficulties.
American internet.
How's your signal, Rev? I think we've lost him again.
Oh, you're back.
Lone Wolf says, the fact that naked lunch makes more sense than the Bible is the only observation any reasonable person really needs to work this stuff out. Naked Lunch is absolutely brilliant. It's one of those movies that every couple of years I slap back on and I sit there and watch. And it's absolutely fantastic. I'm not even going to say anything about it. Go out and watch Naked Lunch with the guy that played the original Robot in it.
Peter Weller.
That's him.
Written by William Burroughs.
Nice. But yeah, watch Naked Lunch. Hey Nathan, nice to see you. We're just dealing with a little bit of connection difficulties from Rev, but so far he's been taking us through his journey of Christian Science and a lot of the beliefs that they had and how very different it is to regular Christianity and how it's not really regarded as either science or Christianity by most. But it's very interesting, and we did briefly touch on the whole babies being atheists thing. Are you back in the room, Rev?
Can you hear us?
We can hear you now, but I don't think... Oh, and he's frozen again. You back?
I can hear you now.
Yeah! Okay, awesome.
I think Dave's froze, or maybe he's just being...
No,
Dave.
he's just really still. Do you know, that's one of the hard things. Like, Dave is a very still character, and sometimes when on the stream, I don't know if he's being quiet or if he's actually frozen.
Yeah. Yeah, he'd be good in Zoom meetings like that.
I'm like the end scene of a... what was the Naked Gun Police...
Oh,
the original series.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, there was a TV series, Police Squad.
Police Squad.
Yeah.
At the end,
And there was the one where
all
he
did
had-
the freeze frame. Yeah.
Ends up pouring out all over his hand, and yeah. Brilliant. Yes, Wesley Curry, this is live. That's why we're having a few technical difficulties, because, you know, when you're streaming live, things can go
Don't
wrong.
encourage him to speak.
Yeah. So, where were we on our list of things? You spoke about how prayer was a bit different in Christian Science and how they reject the Trinity. You spoke about how the omni stuff isn't exactly the same as it's seen in the rest of Christianity. It's like having all the power rather than having, you know, what's the word? Instead of omnipotence, it's actual just having all the power in the situation and holding all the knowledge and so on and so forth. So it's a bit different. You mentioned the faith healing was done differently as well. That was done through prayer. rather than being done through all the laying of hands and the songs and all of that sort of thing. And we covered off God's gender, we covered off Gnosticism, we covered off how the sort of church operates on a day-to-day basis, which was especially those sort of 52 distinct services in a year with the two readers. And you covered off a bit of your schooling, where you actually went to a Lutheran school. Was there anything else about Christian Science that we need to learn tonight, or any other common misconceptions you think people might have of Christian Science?
I think a common misconception that Christian Scientists have is that it works. Outside of it, and it's a very, again, non-judgmental kind of group of people. They're very worried about themselves, and maybe too much to a fault almost, but they're not worried about any sort of social groups or now individual people might, a guy who's a jerk, can be a jerk as a Christian Scientist too, right? But the church doesn't care about gay baby unicorns or anything like that, or what books we need to burn or things, that all does. So, I've never once in my life believed somebody was going to hell, or felt the need to tell them that, or, believe that I was going to some place that they weren't. There's no like elitist or like I'm in a special club here. So, the whole a Christian Scientist is probably been treated rougher by atheists, almost guaranteed, especially if they're older than atheists have. Because that's something that obviously Christians that weren't Christian Scientists really kind of railed against. So, it's dangerous, very dangerous, but it's not like in your face, the shouting and screaming and burning things, and it's pretty, just laid back and relatively chill compared to other groups. So it's very it kind of almost like you might like picture a Buddhist monk or something like that. There's a religious guy. I don't agree with what he's doing, but just leave him alone and he'll leave you.
So yeah. It's quite a bit different. And actually, I was thinking, you were saying that a lot of Christian Scientists get like you said, when you were a Christian Scientist, you got more hell threats from other Christians than you do as an atheist. Mm. And I was thinking, like, a lot of biblical literalists will say that anyone that isn't a biblical literalist is not a true Christian. Right. And I suppose you've basically got all of Christianity telling Christian Scientists you're not true Christians.
Well, right, because basically I'm telling them about the Jesus, and I've read about the Jesus, and I know about the Jesus, but I don't care about the Jesus. You know what I mean? So that's a weird thing for theists to handle, is somebody that, goes to church, believes in God, but does not believe that Jesus died for their sins. It's kind of like disrespecting perhaps like a member of the military or something like that. It's like, whoa, these are sacred cows, and they do actually have sacred cows too. Mm-hmm. But so if it's someone that's altogether dismissive of God, the whole thing, they get that. They don't like it, but they know kind of how to deal with it. But someone that goes to church, prays to God, but doesn't believe Jesus died for their sins is kind of, shoots sparks through their head, I guess. And in all fairness, back then, it was the climate, where I grew up, and was, mostly Christian, and there just weren't, and there was also sort of a cultural going to church. I think you've kind of mentioned that, Dave. Like, you went to church because they had a beer tent that week or something, or that's what you did socially. It's where you talked to people, met people. So, there wasn't like a lot of just non-believers running around, because it just behooved you to be part of the beer tent, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like you can be the kid not invited to the party, or you can kind of pinch your nose and go to the party. So back then, just, get along, go along, and you don't have to believe in anything or do anything. You just, it's a cultural thing. So, yeah, so I guess it wasn't a thing, but yeah, I've definitely butt heads more with, and I've just been around more theists too, And as an atheist today, I'm just kind of like, nah, whatever. So I don't try to defend my, I was just like,
Do you live in a? Sorry, do you live in a particularly religious area now?
I live in Tennessee. And
so,
yes, it is particularly religious, and not the good, fun kind of chill religious either. It is the worst kind of, But it's funny too, though. I think in these last 4 or 5 years, I see all these awful politicians, and we've got a lot of them here, and they sort of kind of like to tie Christianity, people, leftists, or they like to tie the religion to the right wing politics. But I really feel like their religion is this nationalistic sort of thing, and Jesus is kind of waving in the rearview mirror as they're driving away. They've really left the idea of God. They still use it. They still use the imagery of like Trump on a cross, or they like the Christian imagery, and the violence of it all. But this isn't really a Christian movement, I don't believe. It's not motivated by religion. And I've always kind of, one of the other atheist tropes is like how many people have died, because of Christian, the Crusades. And, a lot of it is just people being a bunch of assholes. It's really not religiously motivated any more than like Pol Pot or the North Korean guys are motivated by atheism. They're just assholes. They are powerful, greedy in whatever way, bent on their desires, and they got all these people to fall in line with them. And I've often lately felt this way, that there's a few openly atheist members of Congress in the United States, but not. I don't think any that are elected by the entire state. There might be little districts that have elected, because I know there are some. But I really feel like the first openly atheist person that gets elected on a nationwide is going to be a right-wing guy, because what they're going to be doing, it's going to be like that Boghossian guy, or like a James Lindsay, that's somebody that's down with racism, down with misogyny. They're all about that, and they're just going to be like, let's just put the Jesus stuff to a side. But you agree with me on abortion because it keeps women down. You agree with me against gay marriage. You agree with me on white supremacy. You agree with me on shutting down CRT. So we just don't go to church. That guy, I think, is going to be the first, so when atheists start clamoring for, like, we need more atheists in government, I'm like, yeah, be careful what you wish for. Because I think the first ones that, and honestly, to me, it's like, if you want to imagine what an atheist in office would look like that can get elected. Now, I'm not saying, like there are certainly, like Jared Huffman out of California is wonderful. He's not going to get nationally elected. Ted Cruz could get nationally elected. You want to envision what an atheist will look like in the United States that wins a federal election? Imagine Ted Cruz not pretending to be a Christian. And that's what you're going to get. So essentially Ted Cruz. And he's just going to be like, okay, me and Marco Rubio are just going to quit firing out Bible verses now. And, so we're already there. I think it's just the dressing. And I think as this whole nationalistic MAGA thing moves, it's really moved way, way away from the fears now are communism and socialism, really nothing to do with, back when Reagan got nominated to be, he won the Republican nomination. Big reason why he did is because he courted all the loony Christians that the Republican Party at the time was kind of keeping at arm's length.
I'll be back in a minute.
And he kept all of the, the right wing, or not, but the extremist Christians. The Republicans kind of kept them, kind of like a Barry Goldwater, which I know is way before your time, but kept them at arm's length. When he brought him in, that was kind of like the beginning of the end. But, then the boogeyman was, people without integrity teaching our kids and teaching our kids sinful ways, and devil demon metal rock and devil demon video games. And it was all this like Satanism and stuff like that. Now it's socialism and communism, and they don't understand that any better than they understood, heavy metal. But that's their new boogeyman. So, you really think that it's moving away from being like a really truly religiously motivated, but that's just kind of my take. But yes, here in Tennessee, very religious, very terrible, very, so you just kind of have fun with it.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Do you...
And my favorite thing to do is put that definite article in front of Jesus, and every time just say the Jesus, and that just, that's all I got to do.
Do you ever get any like proper hate these days, or do you tend to skirt around it?
No. And again, it kind of goes back to I like people. I get along with people, which you may or may not believe, but I'm not interested in fighting with people. So I handle the people that don't believe about like I'm Democrat, that don't fly down here either. So either I don't talk to anybody or don't but I like making people laugh. I like laughing. I like talking to people. I like hanging out. I like talking about sports. I like talking about movies and music. So you find your common ground, and I think if people respect you and just see you as a person, then they don't. So no, I don't get a lot of, and I think it's kind of an animalistic sort of thing. If they sense, and anybody, not just Christians, but anybody senses that you're scared or that you're, kind of like a dog showing its belly, they kind of attack. If you just sort of just be, this is the way it is, then people kind of leave it alone.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, I suppose that you're in a red state then.
Yes.
Do you find that you have conflicts with your general beliefs on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, I mean, there ain't a lot that I agree with about anything, and just even like. But it's funny too. Like I've gotten to interact with a lot of people. You take COVID for example, and I've gotten to interact with a lot of people that have had someone either get sick from COVID or die from COVID. And the funny thing is that, or the interesting thing is that almost all of these people that weren't vaccinated regretted it. Almost all of them told me this is not something to mess around with because they got it. But it was because they didn't take it seriously. And it seems like I've heard this so much and it's just my experiences, small sample and all of that. But I've heard way more. I wish I would have taken it more seriously, because I don't think all of a sudden they were going to agree with Biden, or they were going to, praise Biden or whatever. But they just felt like they could leave their guard down. And a lot of people have lost their health and life for that reason, because they just didn't take it seriously. So most people, I always say it's like you got 10% over here, 10% here, and 80% are just trying to get through the damn day. So they're just trying to get along, figure stuff out, not die from COVID. And some of this 80% were like, I just didn't take it seriously enough. I didn't think it applied to me. I kept hearing it was about, you had to have like a health, and it was bad misinformation and stuff like that. So you're almost like not disagreeing with people. You're just like, everybody has got this bad information, so nobody, knows what to believe. And, and then down here, it's kind of magnified because, there's a bit of pride in not being educated, or, it's kind of, it's a not elitist sort of thing,
Yeah.
So, yeah, but, I don't, agree with a lot. It gets kind of frustrating, but you learn to, but you hope you're moving the needle a little bit. And,
Yeah.
And then again, I don't think being aggressive with people or engaging them in that sort of debate me bro sort of way is going to win anybody over. And the only way I've ever gotten people to listen to me is by listening to them.
Yeah, completely with you there.
And then letting them trust you. And then you can kind of whittle away at some of the stupid shit, but you gotta listen probably first down here. Because they're going to get reinforced. If I go and blow them up, they're just going to turn around and talk to the next guy that's going to believe the exact same thing they do and just reinforce that.
Yeah, exactly.
So you got to be in it for the long game.
Yeah, listen to them, show them respect, build rapport, and hopefully one day they'll start listening to the odd thing that you say and then attack.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm with you there. Question from Honestly Atheist. He says, I've been looking into the Satanic Temple recently. Are there any strong opinions about a group like that there?
Me?
Yeah.
I think so. I have always felt that, of course, the only people that really believe in Satan are Christians. But I think, like, one of my favorite musicals, my favorite musical, hands down, in fact, I've seen so many times or listened to, is Jesus Christ Superstar. Because I believe that is very close to how it happened. Like, no, seriously, they had musical numbers, the soldiers, did dances and stuff. That makes me very happy to think about that. But the whole point of it is Judas gets a bad rap, right? Judas is basically, Jesus is going off the rails. Jesus is hurting their ministry. Judas is trying to do what's best for his movement or his ministry, and he feels like Jesus has gone sideways. We gotta, and he tries and tries, and he wants to reconcile. And Judas, but I think the same thing about Satan. I think Satan is basically, kind of like, what, God's a dick. Let's just enjoy life. It's not, so that's all this other stuff comes from like Dante and stuff like that. But, and I'll say this too about the Satan Church is people often say, atheism isn't a religion. And of course, the Satanic Church has a church and they're atheists, but I like it because there's a real good practical reason to oppose the church movement within the government. So practically, you have to have this church so that if and this has happened where some let's say in Alabama, some guy wants to put up a monument to the Ten Commandments. So then the Satanists come in, they're like, hey, we're going to put up this goat monument right next door because, hey, freedom of religion. If you don't have that church, you don't have that thing. You know what I mean? So sometimes you have to get past the silly memes and the silly, argument, debate me bro points and go practical. And I think the Satanists doing accepting humanity, accepting people from their flaws. I dig it. I totally dig it. I just don't like the music, and the eyeliner scares me, and it's just not my scene. But I totally dig it, and I totally respect that they're like, yeah, we are a religion. Yeah, we don't believe in God, and we're going to put our goat statue right up next to your Ten Commandments. Suck it. And I think that's very smart and clever, and it shows the absurdity of it all because we're taking their characters, right? And here's your magic book. Well, here's our magic goat, and then nothing happens. So I'm glad somebody got up on the forefront of doing the practical thing and thinking outside of we're not a religion, we're not a group, we don't have associations, we don't have meetings, we don't have YouTube channels, this is not stamp collecting, whatever. So I dig the Satanists. It just all terrifies me.
Fair. Yeah, there's definitely practical uses, and I actually think I was reading. I don't know if it was Church of Satan or the Satanic Temple. I think it was a Satanic Temple, but like the tenants were all good and respectful sort of things, and all like really positive vibes and everything there. They're all sort of things that you think, these are the rules that people, if you're going to be part of a religion, these are things that you want people to follow.
If there is one inclusive party in this universe, it is hell, right? Hell takes everyone. I mean, their party doesn't close the door for anybody. So I dig that. I really dig the whole. You're good enough for us, and burning in eternity. I really like read stuff from some of the more active Satanists, and I think what they write is very clever, very humanistic, and oftentimes kind of hits me right in the feelings.
Cool. Sorry, I'm just trying to catch up with the chat because there's suddenly like a load. I said, were there any last questions? But I think at this point there aren't. It's just a load of chat. Just say hello to Luke and Godless Granny who've just popped in at the end.
I like those guys too.
I don't know if you're aware, but Luke is actually going to be doing a stream for us on Mondays. It's not starting any time soon necessarily. He's currently doing some revision and stuff like that, but he's going to be doing a psychology stream on Mondays. So that's it. Is that the only reason you joined, Luke? You wanted us to plug your Monday stream and then you're going? What do you expect from a pseudoscientist?
He's a nerd. He's revising.
You don't revise, Luke. You just make it up. It all comes from your mind, doesn't it? So,
That's why I did philosophy.
Awesome. Well, if there aren't any more questions, you've still got a couple of seconds to get them in, but was there anything else that you wanted to tell us tonight, Rev?
Well, hey, I love you guys, and I appreciate, if you're not following Dave and Answers and Reasons, you should. I don't want to get Dave in trouble, but he has really helped me refine a lot of the things I say, and I appreciate just about everything you guys tweet about, and I appreciate you guys' patience with me. And I know I've seen a bunch of guys in the chat that I know, and it's great to interact with a lot of them. And even the bearded heretic too, even that. So I really appreciate, because I've asked a bearded heretic a bunch of questions, and I appreciate the effort you guys put in. And I know I make a lot of jokes and stuff, but I really try to take a lot of this serious, and I think you guys do a better job of the serious part than I do. Which is good, because I've been just coasting through life in my looks so far. So
same here.
Yeah,
my looks and weed.
Yeah, so I got to rely on other things as I'm getting older. But no, I really appreciate the guys that ladies that have talked to me and listened to me or laughed or shared whatever. And I like to try to talk about other things too, so it's not just the same things over and over. But anyway, thank you guys so much and for helping me, and I presume continuing to help me. And I hope everybody had a good time tonight.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's
I
great having
did.
you on here. I'm really glad we had a chance to chat with you. I mean, it was after we saw your video, we were just like, we've got to have Rev on at some point. You got to have him on for a conversation, because we knew it was going to be a good laugh and we'd learn something too. I mean, one of the things that we really liked about your 10 questions video was the fact that you managed to make points with jokes, and there was actually a hell of a lot of content in like a 2-line joke that you could just extrapolate from it, and so you did it really well. And I think
I am, if nothing, value based. I'm like the Costco price per pound
guy. But it was great, and I think the way people can learn and think about things and engage in things a lot better is through humor. Because one of the things that we have with a lot of these conversations, especially on social media, heckles get raised, don't they? People are there's a lot of animosity and there's a lot of argumentation. You get people laughing, that breaks it down. And I think like that, you give people a chance to actually think on things. You make a joke and then someone can go, oh, but actually there's something to learn from that. And I think that's absolutely brilliant way to do it. And I'm really glad you had a chance to come on and do it today.
Vonnegut and all those guys moved me way further away from religion and also just seriousness, right? And than any of the other guys did. I love like Bertrand Russell and stuff, but what really pushed me was the science fiction writers and not making fun at religion. Like I say, it was more just the absurdity of humanity, all of it. And then when you kind of put religion in its place as one little aspect of it, it's not like this whole like, my shit's not absurd, but your shit is. Then it was just kind of like, and then it all kind of fell out.
Yeah, that.
And I'm drinking better liquor these days too, so that
So we have had a couple of questions come in. Luke says, what is one thing you still utilize from your previous religion which is useful to you?
Basically my approach.
Right.
Very, I'm using philosophical in a colloquial way, but always I'm my own biggest skeptic. Like no one is going to out skepticing me, right? I'm always, if things don't work, why don't they work? What do I need to change? I'm always kind of searching. It's the pray unceasingly sort of thing. So definitely that. Like I just don't take a day off from that. Just keep trying to find that. And again, not knowledge, not intelligence, because God knows I haven't that trolley's left the station a long time ago. But it's just that whole how to make it work, how to be better, So that for sure would be the approach. Is I think, and I like it works for me.
Yeah, awesome. And Josiah says, "What's your favorite strain?"
Here's the thing. I don't smoke a lot of the marijuana. I don't know. It's just never been in my life. Now my son does, and I think like I'm immune to it or something. I just take it, and it doesn't like do anything. So I like those gummies, whatever those are. But I like gummies. I like all gummies. So, and I do this. I take vitamin C and vitamin D every day in gummy form, just so I can pretend they're edibles. And I take like 5 of them, and I'm like, yeah, now I'm ready to go. So I don't know. I am not a weed aficionado. I do not know. Sorry to disappoint.
Not a problem. I'm sure no one really minds. Kimo says, how's the back? Oh, that one's for me. How's the back feeling after this stream? Did the animal magnetism help out? I don't know. I'm on a lot of painkillers. So
I'm gonna go on a limb and say no, it did not.
I'll have to update you in the morning though, because that's what I know. Because all the painkillers have worn off overnight,
That's right.
and I wake up and I'm like, I can't move. Someone roll me out of bed, please.
I'll tell you what, though. Getting back to the bearded, his name is Philip too, right?
No, bearded heretic's Luke.
Luke. Yeah, I knew that. So the other thing too, that you grow up without like a lot of medicine, you get pretty tough. Like I'm pretty rugged. Like I don't know what that gives me, but like you know, I'm kind of like RoboCop and that kind of thing, just plowing through stuff because you're just used to like, you know, they're like, Dad, doesn't that hurt? And I'm like, oh yeah. But you just keep going on because you can't, you know, you didn't have that like Tylenol and all of that, you know, because we never took that as kids and stuff. So you get rugged in a way.
Yeah, your tolerance to pain and things like that alters, doesn't it?
Well, no, you still feel it. You just it's your just what's the word? You're committed to the long game of pain. You know what I mean? It's like being in a terrible marriage for 20 years, right? You just realize this is going to hurt for a long time. So let's just make the best of
it. Awesome. All right.
But I think my phone's going to die out here at some point.
That's okay. I think we're pretty much done for today anyway. Unless, Dave, did you have anything that you wanted to ask Rev?
No. Just wanted to say thank you. I learned loads about Christian Science. I really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure.
Me too.
And it was a lot of fun having you on.
Likewise.
Yeah, no, thank you very much for being here. As Dave said, learnt a lot. I don't think I realized how much I didn't know about Christian Science. You know,
there's not a real reason to know anything about it. It's not terribly relevant. I think the only takeaway should be is that not all Christians are, you know, screaming about people going to hell and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's one thing we do try and get across to other atheists as well. I mean, it frustrates us when we talk to an atheist that thinks they've defeated Christianity because they can prove the Bible isn't literally true. And you go, well, what about all the ones that take it as a metaphor? No, because it's literal. Yeah, that's the smallest percentage. Okay, a higher percentage in America maybe, but the smallest percentage of Christians are literalists. And like you say, like most Christians will accept Jesus as the savior, as in someone that died for your sins. But there are even some Christians that don't even have that take on their form of Christianity. So it's not as simple. You need to learn to speak to the people that you're actually speaking to rather than tarring anyone with the same brush. And I think it's a good message for anyone out there. And I hope they found it interesting as well and learnt something. I think anyone who is definitely on our side of the pond will have definitely taken something on board that they would wouldn't have known about because, as I said, Christian Science isn't a big thing over here. But if you are from the States, I hope you enjoyed the stream anyway. So, once again, Rev, thank you so much for being here. I've really enjoyed tonight, and I can't wait to have more conversations with you in the future. Hopefully, you'll come back on stream again too.
Yep. Oh, yeah, definitely.
And, well, that's it from me. You've been watching the Sci-Fi Show. I'm Joe.
I'm Dave.
That's Rev.
Rev.
Have a good night, all.
You bet.